Aviv. Our Middle East correspondent Hugo Bashega went to the site of one of Iran's missile strikes here in this city, where he gave us this update.
This is one of the sites hit during that Iranian missile attack earlier this morning. So this is Tel Aviv, and you can see there's a lot of destruction here. There was a direct hit in this residential neighborhood, so an entire building over there was destroyed. A lot of damage to this one over here, and you can see there's a lot of activity here. Emergency services, police, a lot of work here to remove the rubble, clean up the area. So this happened this morning, just hours after those American B-2 bombers targeted those three key nuclear facilities in Iran. And at around 7 o'clock in the morning, air raid alerts sounded across the country, sending millions of people to shelters, safe rooms, warning them of the risk coming from those ballistic missiles. Now, the Israeli military is saying that most of those missiles that had been fired by Iran were intercepted by the country's air defenses. We heard loud explosions from those interceptions, and I think the fear here is that if this war continues, these Israeli attacks continue, more attacks like this are likely to happen.
That's my colleague Hugo Bashega at the site of one of those missile attacks. Well, the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, that is the UN nuclear watchdog, Rafael Grossi, has posted that in light of the urgent situation in Iran, I am convening an emergency meeting of the IAEA Board of Governors for tomorrow, Monday. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has issued this statement about the strikes, saying, I am gravely alarmed by the use of force by the United States against Iran today. This is a dangerous escalation, he wrote, in a region already on the edge and a direct threat to international peace and security. There is a growing risk that this conflict could rapidly get out of control, he added, with catastrophic consequences for civilians, the region, and the world. Well, in a press briefing in the last hour, the Israeli Defense Forces blamed Iran for fueling terror within the region and reinforced their commitment to bringing the remaining hostages seized by Hamas on the 7th of October home to Israel.
Last night, in a joint operation by the IDF and ISA, the bodies of 3 Israeli hostages were recovered from the Gaza Strip. Ofra Keidar, Yonatan Samerano, and Staff Sergeant Shai Levinson. All 3 were brutally murdered and abducted by the Hamas terrorist organization. Ofra Keidar was 71 years old, a mother of 3, from Kibbutz Be'eri. She was married to Shmuel Keidar. Both were murdered brutally in their kibbutz. Yonatan Samerano was 21 years old. He was celebrating life at the Nova Music Festival when Hamas opened fire on him. He was then dragged into Gaza by Hamas terrorists. Even more disturbing, one of the terrorists was an UNRWA worker. Let that sink in. UN workers took part in the October 7th massacre. Staff Sergeant Shai Levinson was 19 years old. He was a tank commander who bravely fought against terrorists on the morning of October 7th. He fell in battle, defending Israeli communities until his last moments. His body was then taken to Gaza. 50 hostages still remain in brutal captivity. We will not rest until every hostage is home.
Brigadier General Efi Defrin there from the Israeli Defense Forces. Let's go live to Jerusalem now and speak to the BBC's Dan Johnson. Dan, let's talk first of all about the exchange of fire in both directions today between Israel and Iran. The Israeli Defense Forces have released video footage that show Israeli strikes in Iran. Tell us first of all what that shows, and also what more we know about the Iranian missile barrage launched towards Israel.
Yes, it was early this morning, just as Israelis were waking up, that the air raid siren sounded across the country. People were told to take shelter, and then shortly after there was a large missile barrage, Iranian ballistic missiles that were fired at various different Israeli cities, and some of those got through. We could hear loud interception explosions here in Jerusalem, and the air defences look to have been successful here, but elsewhere missiles have got through and caused considerable damage on the ground. There are more than 80 casualties and a number of sites of destruction that the emergency services are still dealing with this morning. So even before some Israelis had absorbed the news of these US strikes overnight, they were feeling the backlash in terms of the Iranian response, and the Israeli Air Force has been in action in response to that missile attack, and that footage shows the Israeli airstrikes in the west of Iran targeting missile launchers, some of them used to fire those missiles this morning, others that could potentially be used in future attacks. They were also targeting Iranian military positions and soldiers on the ground. So the Israeli Air Force continues its strikes against Iran despite the US strikes that took place overnight, and Israel says there will be more of that to come. People here are braced for more Iranian attacks, and the Israeli air defences are on alert. The Israeli Air Force is already conducting further strikes in Iran.
Dan, interesting to hear that soundbite there from the Israeli Defense Forces spokesman talking about the 3 bodies of the Israeli hostages retrieved from Gaza. Of course, there's a tendency, in a sense, for Gaza to slip down the news agenda a little bit as the Iran war continues, despite the tragedy of that war continuing. But I think probably just worth reflecting for a moment on how much has changed in terms of the position of Benjamin Netanyahu from the 7th of October 2023, leaving this country vulnerable to its worst ever attack in its history, losing his reputation overnight as Mr. Security, to suddenly being the Iranian Prime Minister that not only went to direct war with Iran, but managed to co-opt the American president to come in and help out. An extraordinary turn of events and kind of a 180 turn, if you like, for Benjamin Netanyahu in the space of 20 months.
Absolutely. What a roller coaster he has ridden. He was increasingly unpopular in the run-up to the October the 7th attacks. There were protests against his leadership. He was facing accusations of corruption. There was obviously public support in the aftermath of those Hamas attacks for the military action that he started in Gaza, but the public support had been waning because his stated aims during the war in Gaza were to eradicate Hamas and to return hostages to their families. As we're seeing this morning, there are still hostages to be returned. There are still hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. So he had patently failed on that measure, and the fact that Hamas is still operating in Gaza showed that he'd failed at that too. And some will suspect that the campaign he has waged against Iran over the past 7 days is to some degree a distraction technique, and it gives him a promise that he's made to the Israeli people of eradicating the nuclear threat that he's now able to say he's delivered on, even though it's a much less tangible result. Some will accuse him of having talked up that Iranian nuclear threat. The fact that there was no evidence of Iran actually developing nuclear weapons, some will say he had spread that threat, he had talked that up, he had put the Israeli people in fear that Iran might be developing a nuclear weapon so that he could justify the sort of attacks the Israeli Air Force has been conducting over the last 10 days and the sort of strikes that the US has now got involved in. But certainly Benjamin Netanyahu is able to say to his people this morning, I've done what I promised, I am keeping you safe, I have eradicated the existential threat that Iran posed to Israel. But what does that mean next? Israelis are still clearly under threat because they felt the impact of that this morning. What more is to come? Where will Iran target? Is it just this country or others in this region? Are the US potential vulnerable targets going to be hit? Those are the huge questions for the days and weeks ahead. Benjamin Netanyahu, in announcing these strikes, said that they would bring peace and prosperity, but certainly the hours and days ahead are going to be an uncertain and potentially dangerous time.
And Dan, what are you picking up in terms of public opinion on the war with Iran from the people you've spoken to here, but also from the opinion polling that you've managed to see?
Yeah, I think there will be overwhelming welcome for what has happened. There was large-scale public support amongst Israelis for the action that Israel was already taking against Iran, and many supported that going further. They had called for the US to get involved. Indeed, there was some polling that showed as much as 40% of the population actually preferred that this all went a lot further and led to Iranian regime change. Now, the US has said that's not going to happen, even if it's what the Israelis may prefer. So to some degree, I think there will be widespread satisfaction that the perceived threat has apparently been eliminated. At least that's what Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu are claiming. The Iranians are playing that down. But certainly the Israeli leadership is able to say to its people, this is what you wanted, the reassurance that we could do this, that we could keep you safe. We've been able to achieve that. But potentially this does put other Israelis at risk, because no doubt Iran is going to have to formulate something in terms of a response. And as we've just talked about, there are all those other fronts on which Israel is still fighting. And what is to come next in terms of the response from Iran's supporters, its proxies? What will Hamas do? What will the Houthis do? What will Hezbollah do? There are many different threats, many different fronts on which Israel is fighting, and those threats haven't gone away.
Dan Johnson in Jerusalem, thank you.
Go live to Washington, D.C. now and speak to our Chief North America correspondent, Gary O'Donoghue. Gary, it's dawn now, it's morning in Washington, D.C. The next big thing we're waiting on there is this press briefing from the Defence Secretary, Pete Hegseth, and the chairperson of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Kane. What are we expecting to hear from them?
Well, I expect them to set out in a bit more detail what's the operation involved last night. I think they wouldn't have had this if they didn't have something to say about perhaps some evidence of what's been achieved. It is still very early days to do a full sort of battle assessment, but they will want, I think, to get something out there, some indication that backs up the president's words about complete and total obliteration of these three facilities in terms of their nuclear production capacity. And I think they will want to try and reassure through the media, perhaps reassure Americans that this is not the beginning, or there's not going to be mission creep here that will end up involving American troops on the ground, because that is the thing that I'm sure this president will want to go nowhere near, even though, you know, this step, getting involved as a combatant in this way, you know, does go beyond his stated wish to stay out of foreign wars, which he ran on and won on in the November election.
And indeed, there have been many polls out this week, Gary, haven't there been, of the American public not wanting to have anything to do with this, protests arranged under the banner of Not Our War. Interesting to see that the Vice President and Secretary of State Marco Rubio and many others are going to do the round of the Sunday morning talk shows there to try and communicate the message that there was a worthwhile adventure here.
Yeah, I think that you're seeing a strategy here of a kind, with the Pentagon and then those big hitters on the Sunday morning shows to shape the narrative somewhat, because, you know, there's been some pushback from elements here in Congress in particular. You know, even one Republican, Thomas Massie, who was involved in that effort to, you know, get a bipartisan bill through, or a motion through to, you know, require the president to get congressional approval. He was critical this morning. There's been supportive words from other Republicans. Some of them have also said, look, this is not our war, but we're protecting Israel and we're protecting the world from Iran. And then there's been some sort of, you know, much more full-throated support. So you're seeing that on the Republican side, and then on the Democratic side, you're seeing people, you know, saying the president should have come to Congress, that this is all on him now, whatever the consequences are. So really dividing pretty much down party lines there. And so they won't want that narrative to take hold. They will want to try and shape their own, particularly ahead of any potential retaliation, because that is the thing that could change the weather significantly politically.
Indeed, Gary, and we've heard very strong words, haven't we, from Iran this morning about the fact there will be a response, and calling this all the fault of the United States, accusing it of being in breach of international law. Will that be a question that arises in the US amongst both parties as to the actual legality of the action that's been taken here?
I think it will be raised, but I think this administration will try and shrug that off. You international law is a very fluid idea, as you know, a very fluid concept, and certainly anything that involves bending the knee to multilateral institutions like the UN or any other sort of jurisdictional type court is anathema to this president and to this administration. So I think they will try and brush that off. I mean, there's obvious questions to be asked here about, the legitimacy of these strikes versus, perhaps what Russia is doing in Ukraine. I mean, completely different situations, but, there are issues that are raised by both of those that could be contradictory. But I don't think that is something that will trouble Donald Trump, to be fair.
Okay, all right. Gary O'Donoghue there in Washington, D.C., our Chief North America correspondent. Thank you very much for joining us with that. Many countries, allies of the US, are scrambling today to appeal for calm, to appeal for diplomacy, de-escalation. Here in the UK, Sir Keir Starmer has called a meeting of COBRA for later on today. We've heard the Pope intervene as well, and he's calling on the international community not to forget about the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza, while the focus is shifting to what happens between Israel and Iran. Well, earlier I spoke to our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, about this. We spoke straight after that news conference that the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi gave in Istanbul, and I asked her what we had learned from what he had said.
Their position has not changed. The foreign minister was in Geneva. We were there as well, where the European diplomats were saying to him, you've got to talk to the United States. He said not while there are Israeli attacks on the country. Now they've been attacked by the United States, and his position is exactly the same. We will not negotiate under fire. It's clear that messages are going back and forth, and no doubt there'll be a lot more messages today. This is not just an attack on Iran. This is something which is having already repercussions across the region. There's been condemnation from states in the region, including Saudi Arabia. They will want to prevent a further escalation. But he was also, Katrina, very adamant that Iran will respond. He wouldn't go into, not surprisingly, because there was an observation that even though President Trump said that Iran's nuclear facilities were completely obliterated, as the foreign minister said, they don't know yet how much damage was done, and if there's not that much damage, they could find an off-ramp. But the message from him was it doesn't really matter how much damage was done. Symbolically, they have, as you've just mentioned, crossed a very red line. This is a very, very delicate balancing act for Iran. If it doesn't do anything, it loses face. If it does too much, it loses everything. Because if they provoke President Trump, the commander-in-chief of the United States and Israel, they could come back with all of the weight of the American military might.
He also mentioned he was going to Moscow today to meet President Putin.
President Putin has been trying to intervene in this crisis. Of course, he will have many motivations for doing so. He's long wanted to be seen as a peacemaker in the Middle East. He had a statement earlier this week saying that he did not believe there was intelligence saying that Iran was developing a bomb. So he will try to maximize this opportunity. Iran is very much like other states in the region. They look east and they look west, trying to maximize their position. You also heard him saying he's obviously had talks in Turkey with the Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, he's a member of NATO. He has very strong alliances. He wants to be seen to be mediating. Many will want to be seen to mediate. But right now, it all rests on what Iran does next.
And the foreign minister as well, very keen to say that this was an attack on international order, on international law, not just on Iran. It's very keen to widen out the viewpoint.
Well, factually, he's correct. There was diplomacy going on when Israel unleashed its strikes that Friday morning. There was meant to be a sixth round of talks with Steve Witkoff and the Iranians in Muscat. It's a violation of the UN Charter to attack another state. Israel described it as a preemptive strike for self-defense. Rafael Grossi, the Director General of the IAEA, has said repeatedly that nuclear sites should not be attacked. So Iran is trying to find strength in going back to United Nations laws and resolutions and the laws of war. but it's not working against Israel, who basically says you're an existential threat to us. And you've heard from many of Western foreign ministers, most of all Germany, saying Israel has a right to defend itself. His line, too, is that there's been a betrayal of diplomacy. They want the doors open for diplomacy, but not when this is happening.
And very clear as well, using language about American collusion with Israel, that they now see this as essentially a joint mission, it would appear, US and Israel united in the attacks.
No, I interviewed the Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister last week, Saeed Khatibzadeh, and he said that they heard, in private, they received messages indirectly, as we just heard, from the Americans saying we were not involved, this was an Israeli strike. Marco Rubio said that also in public. But then you got President Trump coming out and saying we have superiority over the skies of Tehran. And President Trump almost seeming to take credit for what he described as the excellent Israeli strikes. So both in diplomacy as well in war, the Iranians keep saying they don't understand what the message is from the United States. And as you know, Katrina, there are different messages coming out. Most of them from President Trump, who a little more than 10 days ago was telling Israel, stop threatening Iran militarily. You're getting in the way of my diplomacy. Now he seems to have really put on his commander-in-chief hat and really wants to be seen as the one who is now, and he is, directing the course of this war, this war.
For those who have grave concerns about regional escalation here, what will they have taken from what the foreign minister said there?
He was asked specifically whether Iran would block the Strait of Hormuz. That's a very critical waterway where a lot of the oil freighters pass through. That would have, if that is closed, it would have a huge impact on oil prices worldwide. It would have an impact on economic activity worldwide. He refused to be drawn on whether he would do that because Iran has to balance carefully. It doesn't want to infuriate Iran's Arab allies in this fight. They also do not want a wider escalation of this war. There aren't any good options for Iran. If it attacks U.S. military bases in the region, there's at least 8 bases, plus many other U.S. military targets that they could possibly look at. They will draw the United States in more directly. If they take economic action, that will backfire on Iran. So again, he was adamant there will be a response, but they have to calculate carefully. But as always, Katrina, in this kind of an escalating tension, it's not just what you do, but how the other side perceives what you do. And therefore, whatever Iran does will be regarded as being threatening from the United States and Israel, who are likely to retaliate. I am sure we saw last year where there were these direct strikes between Iran and Israel, that behind the scenes there were people saying, okay, right, you've responded, let's leave it there. Restraint. But we are in a totally new game now.
And it appeared from what we heard from President Trump last night that he was kind of saying, oh, this is the only thing we're doing. But of course, can't say that for sure until we see the Iranian response.
Yes, he said you have to come to peace. And as always with President Trump, you don't know what come to peace means. He wanted Iran to effectively negotiate a new nuclear deal in 60 days. And when that didn't work, Israel attacked on the 61st day. It took 2 years to negotiate the last Iran nuclear deal. A new one shouldn't take that long. They can build on the old one. But they were, even though both sides said they were close, it could not have been done in 60 days. And President Trump, as you know, Katrina, likes to do things quickly. A deal in a day. It won't take a day to do a deal. The message from the Europeans in Geneva was only diplomacy can find a way forward. We've seen time and again in the Middle East that military action does not provide a long-term solution.
Now, speaking at the White House, President Trump said that the US had hit 3 key sites. So let's have a look at where they are and what they are. So they're at Fordo, Natanz and Esfahan. President Trump says that these sites have been obliterated. That's the word he's using. Esfahan is a uranium conversion plant, while Natanz is an enrichment plant. Now, even before the US strikes, the International Atomic Energy Agency said Natanz had sustained severe damage. But the main site hit was Fordo. The uranium enrichment site is situated about 60 miles, 100 kilometres or so south of the capital, Tehran, in a mountainous region. It is thought to consist of 2 main tunnels, and they house centrifuges used to enrich uranium, as well as a network of smaller tunnels. So reaching this underground installation, it's about 60 metres below ground, requires more powerful bunker busting bombs, as they're known, which only the US has. Now, their official name is the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, and the only planes that can carry such bombs are the B-2 stealth bombers. Senior US Department of Defense officials have confirmed that this is the bomb that was used in these attacks, with 2 deployed for each of the nuclear targets. Now, BBC journalists are currently unable to report from inside Iran due to the restrictions by the Iranian government, but Iranian officials have denied that the country suffered a major blow. They said nuclear material had been removed from the targeted facilities some time ago. The UN nuclear watchdog says there's been no increase in radiation levels. So let's talk a little bit more about the logistics of just what's happened here. I'm joined by the Security Brief's Mikey Kay. He's a former senior officer and assault helicopter pilot with the British military. Mikey, thanks for being with us. When President Trump says he's managed to obliterate these 3 sites using those bombs that I've just mentioned there, is that possible? Is that what they do?
Yeah, I mean, Katrina, it's way more nuanced than a word obliterated. In military parlance, we call it BDA, bomb damage assessment. And bomb damage assessment can come from satellite imagery, or it can come from something like the Brits have something called the Lightning Pod, which is a targeting, acquisition and surveillance pod that sits under an airplane that can use electro-optics or it can use infrared. And what it does is basically it helps the pilot target a facility, but then it also records what the bomb damage assessment is on it through video. And I think we're unlikely to see anything like that based on Fordo because the B-2 doesn't have that capability in terms of that pod, if you like. So it's really hard to understand the actual real damage that's occurred. And it's not just from the GBU-57, as you articulated, Katrina. There were TLAM, Tomahawk land attack missile, cruise missiles that also struck, I think, in the region of around 30. They won't be used for a bunker busting capability, but you've got to look at the sort of facility as a whole. You've got to sort of take a holistic view of what it is. So we're talking very much about the GBU-57. That's going to be used for a penetration effect. So, you know, the centrifuges where the uranium-235 is enriched, they will be deep underground, but there will be other facilities around the Fordo plant, such as, you know, how the plant gets access to electricity. You know, there'll be supply sort of buildings, and there'll be other softer targets around the Fordo facility that the Tomahawk land attack missiles will have been used for. And that the TLAM basically can be launched from a submarine or from a warship. It's got a range of about 2,500 kilometers, around 1,500 miles. It's subsonic, so it travels at about 3/4 of the speed of sound. And it travels very, very, very low level as well, so it's really hard to detect by radar.
Now, given though that pilots, physical people, had to fly this in quite a risky mission, it would seem, what kind of calculation would the US military and the president have had to put into getting involved like this?
Yeah, I mean, it would be one iterative risk assessment, probability versus consequence. The B-2 stealth bomber, it's called the B-2 Spirit, is a strategic air asset. That means there aren't very many of them. And if you lose one, that's a significant blow to your capability. Sorry, I've got the sniffles. So the risk assessment that will have been taken in this is obviously if the US are going to use this B-2 in a GBU-57 strike, and we're not just talking about 1, we're talking about 6, which is 2 per aircraft, which is probably 3, then obviously the Iranian air defenses are going to have to be attrited to the point where the US determine that risk is okay. So you'll have seen last week, we saw Trump talking about air superiority. I mean, that's not language that Trump uses. Someone's obviously fed that to him. But air superiority is a doctrinal word that is used to attrit another country's air defense network. So that means going after its aircraft, air defense aircraft. We saw in Tehran airport last week that F-14s were being targeted. And it means going after its surface-to-air missile systems. Also means going after its ballistic missile sites, so it can't respond. So there's this whole attritive strategy that the US has taken, and we saw that last week, and that was to get them to a position where if they wanted to use the B-2 and the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, then the risk would be deemed okay in order to do that. And so that's sort of the strategy building up to what we've seen today.
I think Mark has a question for you from Israel there.
Thanks, Katrina. Hi, Mikey. It's Mark Lowen here in Tel Aviv. I just had a couple of things I wanted to ask you, actually. First of all, I was reading that both the Obama and Biden administrations actually had a kind of model of Fordo built in the White House and presentations that would sort of test whether or not a B-2 bomber and indeed a bunker buster could potentially really destroy it. And there were some questions really over whether one or even a succession of the bunker busters could tunnel down that far if it were further down than 60 meters below ground. So I was just wondering, do you think that there would even be questions as to whether even the bunker busters could tunnel that far down and actually destroy Fordo completely?
I mean, that's that's the number one question. But we talk about destroy, but actually degrade and destroy is kind of the terminology. So you're looking primarily to degrade Iran's ability to enrich uranium-235. Ultimately, you'd like to destroy its capabilities to do that, but it's a graduated and proportionate effect. So in order to do that, you have to take a holistic view at the capability. So yes, you have the 2,000 plus centrifuges that are deep underground, some 200 feet, in where the uranium is being enriched in the halls, but also you've got the ancillary services, like we saw at Fordo, which has a power plant on the side of it, which provides the plant with electricity. You've got all sorts of supply of whatever materials are being used in order to facilitate the enrichment of 235. They were the softer targets, and that's what you're seeing the TLAMs being used for, is to soften up the target. And then, as you're talking about, Mark, you then got the GBU-57, which has the ability to carry a 13,600 kilogram warhead or a 30,000 pound warhead. It's GPS guided, which means it's highly accurate. And it has the ability to be able to penetrate down to around 200 feet and then explode at 200 feet. I think in terms of gauging what the ultimate damage is, whether you've degraded or destroyed, there's no doubt in my mind that the Fordo facility would have been degraded 100%. Has it been destroyed? I mean, you'd have to understand what the geography is of the rock, for example, and how the ability of a GBU-57, one GBU-57, what's going to be the effect of one dropping, and then a successive one dropping on the same area, and then a third one dropping on the same area. And I think that's a really hard thing to gauge and assess. And as I was saying to Katrina, a lot of the assessments come through BDA, bomb damage assessment, and they usually can be things through what's called the lightning pod, which is targeting surveillance acquisition through electric optics and through infrared. I don't think there's going to be that capability of being able to have a look on that bomb damage assessment through these strikes. So I think it's going to be more through satellite imagery, but understanding what's happened underneath the ground through satellite imagery, as you know, is really hard.
And I wonder, Mikey, what you make of the fact that the B-2 bombers seem to have been launched either directly from their base in Missouri or indeed from Guam, the US overseas territory, about 9,000 kilometers away from Iran, rather than from Diego Garcia, the base in the Indian Ocean, which was given back to Mauritius recently by the Brits, still run by the Brits, and where the Americans are allowed to operate out of. It's obviously much closer to Iran. Can we read anything into that in terms of America not wanting to launch from Diego Garcia because potentially of diplomatic tensions over a perceived military cooperation between the US and UK?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be diplomatic concerns. We go back to the risk equation again as well, and also the capability equation. So the US have deployed B-2s to Diego Garcia. We've seen through satellite imagery on the airfield in Diego Garcia that B-2s have been stationed there, and we know that B-2s have been conducting strikes on the Houthis in Yemen, which is about 4,000 kilometers away. You then also got Iran, which is about 5,300 kilometers away. So, that wasn't just part of targeting the Houthis. That was a message to the Iranians that we have a strategic asset that we can base in proximity to you, and we can strike you from that. Now, the B-2 has an ability to air-to-air refuel. So in terms of its technology and its capability, that isn't the hindrance, if you like, or the long pole in the tent. The long pole in the tent is crew hours and the ability for pilots and crews to be able to fly the type of distances and hours that are required in order to hit targets. So yes, they can get airborne from the US. Yes, they can refuel. Where does the B-2 go after that? Is a big question. Would it go to Diego Garcia? So as a former strategic military planner, we go back to the risk equation. What is the risk, both diplomatically and militarily, of basing a B-2 stealth bomber at Diego Garcia? So, for example, the first thing I'd look at is what is Iranian ballistic missile capability? What are their missiles that have the maximum range? And would Diego Garcia be within that circle of risk, if you like? There are other bases. The B-2s could come back to RAF Lakenheath, which is in East Anglia, which is a huge military base there. It could go back to somewhere in Europe. But I think there's a number of assessments that will be made, as you rightly said, both across the diplomatic all the way down to the military and the tactical, to ensure that risk is mitigated across that entire spectrum.
Mikey Kay, thanks very much indeed. Really interesting to talk to you, and I'm sure there will be a forensic reconstruction of behind the scenes of what happened in the early hours of today, in the days to come. Well, the president of the International Committee of the Red Cross, which of course is the humanitarian aid organization and Nobel laureate, which is the custodian of the rules of war. The ICRC has said in a statement that the intensification and spread of major military operations in the Middle East risk engulfing the region and the world in a war with irreversible consequences. The world cannot absorb limitless war, he went on to say. Upholding international humanitarian law is not a choice, it is an obligation. Well, let us go live now to our South Caucasus correspondent Reyhan Dimitri, who is in Mehdi in Armenia, which is right on the border with Iran. Reyhan, we spoke yesterday about the flow of people going across that border. Not a huge flow yesterday, but I wonder whether it has picked up today in light of the American bombing.
Indeed, it did, Mark. Today we're seeing way more people, larger groups crossing into Armenia from Iran. And people are saying that even larger numbers of people are inside Iran are moving to the border with Turkey. A short while ago, I spoke to one young woman who traveled from Tehran. And she gave a lot of description of what's happening. She told me that inside in Tehran, there is internet blackout. There's no way to get any information for people. All they can hear is the sound of explosions. She said that she had to leave her pets with her younger sister, who is quite traumatized, because this younger sister witnessed, she saw a missile hitting a building when she was driving her car. And she described that her sister froze. She couldn't drive her car. Her legs were not moving. And after that, she just feels very traumatized. And it was kind of quite a vivid description of the situation that many people find themselves in Tehran. She also mentioned that there were bread shortages and very little information. And I said, look, are people getting any information from state channels? And she mentioned state radio. And the message that is coming through is kind of encouraging resilience, and the message to the Iranian people that is coming from the state channels is to stay strong, that Iran will defend itself. So people are in the unknown based on this latest account that I just heard.
Reyhan, shortly after the incoming barrage of missiles here in Israel this morning, there were sirens that also went off in neighbouring Jordan. I just wonder whether there is nervousness there on the Armenian side of the border about sort of stray missiles and potential strikes close to the border that could potentially threaten that very border and Armenia's territorial integrity.
I'm sure there are fears because this country borders Iran. But we're kind of focusing at this stage, we're focusing our work on trying to get accounts of those who are escaping, fleeing the violence and crossing into safety here in Armenia.
Rehan Dimitri in Mehri on the Armenia-Iran border. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Go live to the Pentagon at this point because the next big event we're waiting on is a press briefing there by the Secretary of Defence, Pete Hegseth, alongside the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That's going to be happening there. You can see the two podiums are set up at the Pentagon. Incredibly rare to have press briefings at the Pentagon under this administration. The Defence Secretary prefers to do one-on-one interviews, usually with Fox News, but in this case he's going to be there with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They'll both make statements, we're told, and then they will take some questions from journalists who are gathered there already, as you can see in your screen. So we are expecting there to get quite a lot of detail on this mission, on the US strikes on those 3 locations in Iran, and crucially we're expecting some information that has led the President to describe that these sites have been obliterated. We were just hearing from Mikey Kay there about how military officials make those kinds of determinations. So we are expecting to get that level of detail from the Secretary of Defence, Pete Hegseth, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Kane, with him there as well. So not due to get underway there for another 10 minutes or so, but we will go live to it as soon as it begins. So do stay with us here for that. Now, in the meantime, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has called for a return to diplomacy. He's been speaking just in the last hour about the situation overnight. Let's have a listen into what he had to say.
Well, it's clearly a fast-moving situation, and there's been a huge amount of discussions in the days since the G7 ended, and the US has now taken the action to alleviate the threat that Iran's nuclear program poses. My position throughout has been as calling for de-escalation, to get people around the table to negotiate a better outcome diplomatically. And I've been talking to international leaders in recent days, but particularly intensely this morning. We'll continue to do so during the course of today.
And just final question, Prime Minister, what's your message to British citizens? Are you getting them out of the region now?
Well, for British citizens, we've been saying for some time to register their presence. And so far as Israel is concerned, just as soon as we can get charter flights off, we will do so. But I urge all citizens to make contact with the Foreign Office so that we can facilitate whatever support is needed.
OK, Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister there speaking a little bit earlier. Well, speaking here on BBC with my colleague Laura Koonsberg this morning, the Iranian ambassador to the UK, Saeed Ali Mousavi, has called the US attacks on Iranian nuclear sites another dirty page, a violation of international law. He responded to concerns by NATO watchdog IAEA about Iran's nuclear activities.
During our interaction with the IAEA, there were and there are some ambiguities regarding for the nuclear activities. With the same procedure with the other countries has their own ambiguities, and so the IAEA inspection come to that country and as well as to my country has a different monitoring, has a different inspections regarding to remove any misunderstanding, to remove any ambiguity.
There is no misunderstanding
through the diplomacy.
There is no misunderstanding of the evidence, and I want to ask you about what happens next after these attacks. But before we do that, why on earth does Iran require 60% enriched uranium if it has no interest in building a nuclear weapon? Yeah. Any security expert you ask will tell you there's only one reason to have that.
Regarding for our enrichment, that you see that we should mention these activities within the JCPOA and as well as with our inherent rights regarding for the peacefully using of the nuclear energy for generation of the fuel, electricity, medicine, and every R&D activities.
There is no requirement for uranium
you see that regarding for the enrichment of the 60%, according to the technical experts, they believe that this level of their enrichment, first of all, would be one part of the R&D activities regarding to different issues related to the nuclear activities, and all of them has been monitored extensively and comprehensively by IAEA.
Well, any security expert you speak to and you ask about this would tell you that there is no need for that kind of level of enriched uranium for anything other than building a weapon. But I want to talk about this attack. The American president
there is no deviation from our side to go into the military attack. Definitely.
There is very clear signaling from America. They will strike you again if you do not negotiate, if you don't give up your nuclear ambitions. Will you do that? What would it take for you?
Excuse me, Laura. We were in the middle of the negotiation. On Friday, that the Israeli regime attacked us, the next Sunday, it was planned to have the next round of the negotiation with Mr. Mitkov and Mr. Arakchi in Muscat. But unfortunately, Netanyahu destroyed this diplomacy. There is no any pretext to do that the Iran, making some problem for the diplomacy. No, it's still that the Iran, wherever and whenever that we reiterated regarding for our, intention, our strong desire to have a diplomacy, to have a negotiation, to reach the one compromise, and according to the mutual benefit for both sides. That, unfortunately, now we are facing with the one aggression raised by and made by Israeli regime against our national sovereignty, our people, and our civilian, population.
Iran's ambassador to the UK. Well, also speaking to my colleague Laura Kuenssberg, the Israeli President Isaac Herzog said Iran's nuclear program had been substantially hit.
I commend President Donald Trump for his brave decision, correct decision, historic decision. I think this serves the national security interests of many nations in the world, nations who are potentially threatened by the Iranians' both terror, missiles, and nuclear program.
Did you know this was going to happen, and did you ask America to take this action directly?
So we were very cautious all throughout, as you could see. We decided to leave it to the Americans and to the president if he wants to carry out the strike, because the strike was aimed on very specific installations where the Iranian nuclear program was very much advanced, and it was actually a clear and imminent threat to the free world. I didn't know about it specifically. I was woken up when it happened. But I can say that what's really is important here is the fact that it can open a new venue in the Middle East, because I think there's a potential for a different Middle East, as President Trump said in his statement.
And yet, many people, and Iran certainly disputes that they presented an imminent threat to your country. But do you believe this morning that Iran's nuclear capabilities have been eliminated, that they have been obliterated, as President Trump suggested?
So we don't know yet the exact details, and me as a head of state without executive powers, I will await my discussions with the Prime Minister later on. But I can say that it's quite clear to me that the Iranian nuclear program has been hit substantially. I don't know exactly in detail, but I think all the facts prove, because that comes in addition to the Israeli strikes throughout the week, which were very vital and important in respect to this threat. Let's understand, for 80 years the world has been very clear that a combination of nuclear capability with a very, very extreme ideology, such as the jihadist ideology of Iran, is a very clear and present danger to the world. And that is why, for decades, the international community has taken very strict decisions that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. However, the Iranians kept on working underneath, clandestinely, all the time, in a very elaborate system of development of nuclear capability, which is clearly a threat, and a huge threat, to nations in the Middle East, nations in the world, and of course to Israel. And let's be very clear. I'm always asking everybody, and they don't have an answer. Why would Iran have missiles all the way to London?
Iran, of course, has denied those ambitions which you claim, and we are speaking to them in the programme as well this morning. But in terms of what Israel's plan now is, if you believe the nuclear facilities have been damaged, they have been removed to an extent, will Israel stop its attacks on Iran that have carried on overnight?
So the attacks are focused on the Iranian nuclear program and, of course, on the fact that Iran is launching ballistic missiles against us. In the last hour, we suffered heavy damages in cities around Israel, very heavy damages. So far, thank God, without losses of life. But we have to do whatever it takes to defend ourselves against those missiles. These are huge missiles of hundreds of kilos, and also missiles that scatter bombs all over in 7-kilometer perimeter. So we are doing whatever it takes to eliminate them and delineate the capabilities of Iran.
You began this attack on Iran 10 days ago. Now the Americans have taken out, it appears, at least most of the nuclear facilities. Will you stop your aggression towards Iran? If your goal was to damage the nuclear facilities, America has done that on your behalf. Surely then, to bring peace and safety for your own civilians, it's time to stop.
So the way to do it is, of course, to deal with it in the international level and make sure that there is an exit strategy that contains and limits the capability of Iran to spread havoc, terror, missiles, and move to its nuclear program. I think this is exactly where the international community meets and discusses in a very serious way. What President Donald Trump has done is really protect and defend the free world in this very important step tonight.
Hello, I'm Katrina Perry. You're watching BBC News. We're bringing you rolling coverage after the US bombed 3 major Iranian nuclear sites, inserting itself directly into the war between Iran and Israel.
Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
Iran responded, launching a barrage of missile attacks against Israel. The Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi condemned the US strike, saying President Trump had betrayed Iran, which was committed to diplomacy, he said, and he'd betrayed the American people who'd been promised an end to US involvement in Middle East wars.
The warmongering and lawless administration in Washington is solely and fully responsible for the dangerous consequences and far-reaching implications of its act of aggression.
Well, strikes continued this morning as both countries exchanged missile fire. Sirens sounded in several regions as Israel's defensive systems activated to intercept Iranian strikes. These pictures here show some of the damage from the Iranian attack. Israel says a number of areas were hit in the north and the centre of the country, with the Health Ministry reporting at least 86 casualties. The UK Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, says Iran should return to the negotiating table, and an escalation of the situation in the Middle East, he said, is in no one's interests.
The US has now taken the action to alleviate the threat that Iran's nuclear program poses. My position throughout has been as calling for de-escalation, to get people around the table to negotiate a better outcome diplomatically.
Let's go live to the US now, to the Pentagon, because the big event we're waiting for this hour is a press briefing to be given by the Secretary of Defence, Pete Hegseth, and by the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Dan Kane. They're going to talk through just what happened in that mission last night, those US strikes on those 3 nuclear sites. We can see from the image there, some of the officials at the Pentagon there have brought out some images, and there we have the Secretary and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So let's listen in right now.
In the middle of the night, against 3 nuclear facilities in Iran, Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan, in order to destroy or severely degrade Iran's nuclear program. And as the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs will demonstrate, it was an incredible and overwhelming success. The order we received from our Commander-in-Chief was focused, it was powerful, and it was clear. We devastated the Iranian nuclear program. But it's worth noting the operation did not target Iranian troops or the Iranian people. For the entirety of his time in office, President Trump has consistently stated for over 10 years that Iran must not get a nuclear weapon. Full stop. Thanks to President Trump's bold and visionary leadership and his commitment to peace through strength, Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated. Many presidents have dreamed of delivering the final blow to Iran's nuclear program, and none could until President Trump. The operation President Trump planned was bold and it was brilliant, showing the world that American deterrence is back. When this president speaks, the world should listen. And the U.S. military, we can back it up. The most powerful military the world has ever known. No other country on planet Earth could have conducted the operation that the chairman is going to outline this morning. Not even close. Just like Soleimani found out in the first term, Iran found out when POTUS says 60 days that he seeks peace and negotiation, he means 60 days of peace and negotiation. Otherwise, that nuclear program, that nuclear capability will not exist. He meant it. This is not the previous administration. The President Trump said no nukes. He seeks peace, and Iran should take that path. He sent out a truth last night saying this: any retaliation by Iran against the United States of America will be met with force far greater than what was witnessed tonight. Signed, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Iran would be smart to heed those words. He's said it before, and he means it. I want to give recognition to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Joint Staff, General Eric Kurilla at CENTCOM, who did a phenomenal job, he and his staff, all of CENTCOM. Policy across the board, this was a joint effort, and across the Pentagon effort. I want to recognize the pilots who flew those bombers, who flew those fighters, who flew those refuelers, warriors. I want to recognize the sailors on those destroyers, in those subs, on those carriers, warriors, all of them. I want to recognize our soldiers doing air defense, base defense, QRF, warriors, all of them. Every American involved in this operation performed flawlessly. And I want to give recognition to our allies in Israel as well. This is a plan that took months and weeks of positioning and preparation so that we could be ready when the President of the United States called. It took a great deal of precision. It involved misdirection and the highest of operational security. Our B-2s went in and out of downtown Tehran, of these nuclear sites, in and out and back without the world knowing at all. In that way, it was historic. A strike that included the longest B-2 Spirit bomber mission since 2001 and the first operational employment of the MOP, a massive ordnance penetrator. The mission demonstrated to the world the level of joint and allied integration that speak to the strength of our alliance and our joint forces. As President Trump has stated, the United States does not seek war, but let me be clear. We will act swiftly and decisively when our people, our partners, or our interests are threatened. Iran should listen to the President of the United States and know that he means it, every word. I want to give congratulations to our Commander-in-Chief. It was an honor to watch him lead last night and throughout, and to our great American warriors on this successful operation. God bless our troops. God bless America. And we give glory to God for his providence and continue to ask for his protection. I turn it over now to the chairman for specifics.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thanks for recognizing all of our folks out there doing our nation's work, and nice to see everybody on this early Sunday morning. Last night, on the President's orders, U.S. Central Command, under the command of General Eric Kurilla, executed Operation Midnight Hammer, a deliberate and precise strike against 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. This was a complex and high-risk mission carried out with exceptional skill and discipline by our joint force. I want to thank every service member, planner, operator that made this mission possible. Their actions reflect the highest standards of the United States Armed Forces. This operation was designed to severely degrade Iran's nuclear weapons infrastructure. It was planned and executed across multiple domains and theaters with coordination that reflects our ability to project power globally with speed and precision at the time and place of our nation's choosing. This was a highly classified mission with very few people in Washington knowing the timing or nature of this plan. I'll refer you to the graphic on the side as I walk you through some of the operational details. At midnight Friday into Saturday morning, a large B-2 strike package comprised of bombers launched from the continental United States. As part of the plan to maintain tactical surprise, part of the package proceeded to the west and into the Pacific as a decoy, a deception effort known only to an extremely small number of planners and key leaders here in Washington and in Tampa. The main strike package, comprised of 7 B-2 Spirit bombers, each with 2 crew members, proceeded quietly to the east with minimal communications. Throughout the 18-hour flight into the target area, the aircraft completed multiple in-flight refuelings. Once over land, the B-2s linked up with escort and support aircraft in a complex, tightly timed maneuver requiring exact synchronization across multiple platforms in a narrow piece of airspace, all done with minimal communications. This type of integration is exactly what our joint force does better than anyone else in the world. At approximately 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time last night, and just prior to the strike package entering Iran, a U.S. submarine in the Central Command Area of Responsibility launched more than 24 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles against key surface infrastructure targets at Esfahan. As the Operation Midnight Hammer strike package entered Iranian airspace, the U.S. employed several deception tactics, including decoys, as the 4th and 5th generation aircraft pushed out in front of the strike package at high altitude and high speed, sweeping in front of the package for enemy fighters and surface-to-air missile threats. The strike package was supported by U.S. Strategic Command, U.S. Transportation Command, U.S. Cyber Command, U.S. Space Command, U.S. Space Force, and U.S. European Command. As the strike package approached Fordo and Natanz, the U.S. protection package employed high-speed suppression weapons to ensure safe passage of the strike package, with fighter assets employing preemptive suppressing fires against any potential Iranian surface-to-air threats. We are currently unaware of any shots fired at the U.S. strike package on the way in. At approximately 6:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2:10 a.m. Iran time, the lead B-2 dropped 2 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weapons on the first of several aim points at Fordo. As the President stated last night, the remaining bombers then hit their targets as well, with a total of 14 MOPs dropped against 2 nuclear target areas. All 3 Iranian nuclear infrastructure targets were struck between 6:40 p.m. and 7:05 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, that's about 2:10 in the morning local time in Iran, with the Tomahawk missiles being the last to strike at Esfahan to ensure we retain the element of surprise throughout the operation. Following weapons release, the Midnight Hammer strike package exited Iranian airspace and the package began its return home. We are unaware of any shots fired at the package on the way out. Iran's fighters did not fly, and it appears that Iran's surface-to-air missile systems did not see us. Throughout the mission, we retained the element of surprise. In total, U.S. forces employed approximately 75 precision-guided weapons during this operation. This included, as the President stated last night, 14 30,000-pound GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, marking the first ever operational use of this weapon. I know that battle damage is of great interest. Final battle damage will take some time, but initial battle damage assessments indicate that all three sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction. More than 125 U.S. aircraft participated in this mission, including B-2 stealth bombers, multiple flights of fourth and fifth generation fighters, dozens and dozens of air refueling tankers, a guided missile submarine, and a full array of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, as well as hundreds of maintenance and operational professionals. As the Secretary said, this was the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history and the second longest B-2 mission ever flown, exceeded only by those in the days following 9/11. Well prior to the strike, General Kurilla elevated force protection measures across the region, especially in Iraq, Syria, and the Gulf. Our forces remain on high alert and are fully postured to respond to any Iranian retaliation or proxy attacks, which would be an incredibly poor choice. We will defend ourselves. The safety of our service members and civilians remains our highest priority. This mission demonstrates the unmatched reach, coordination, and capability of the United States military. In just a matter of weeks, this went from strategic planning to global execution. This operation underscores the unmatched capabilities and global reach of the United States military. As the President clearly said last night, no other military in the world could have done this. I join the President and the Secretary in being incredibly proud of the air crews, naval forces, cyber operators, planners, and support teams, and commanders who made this mission possible. It is their skill, discipline, and teamwork that makes this operation possible. I am particularly proud of our discipline related to operational security, something that was of great concern to the President, the Secretary, General Kurilla, and me, and we will continue to focus on this. As we stand here this morning, many assets are still airborne, and we have hundreds deployed. I ask that we keep our warfighters on their way home and our deployed service member in our thoughts. Our joint force remains ready to defend the United States, our troops, and our interests in the region. Thank you very much.
We will take a few questions, Phil.
Me?
Yeah.
So, is regime change off the table, Mr. Secretary? And to the chairman, you said the battle damage assessment is still ongoing, but do you believe that some nuclear capability in Iran remains?
This mission was not and has not been about regime change. The President authorized a precision operation to neutralize the threats to our national interests posed by the Iranian nuclear program and the collective self-defense of our troops and our ally Israel.
Thanks for your question. I think BDA is still pending, and it would be way too early for me to comment on what may or may not still be there. But thanks for the question.
Green. No, behind you.
Excuse me, Mr. Secretary, can you tell me, was there a particular moment when the President decided to pull the trigger on this operation where he said, now, rather than being, something in the holster, now we're going to pull the trigger on it?
I would just say, having the opportunity to witness his leadership, he was fully committed to the peace process, wanted a negotiated outcome, gave Iran every single opportunity and unfortunately was met by stonewalling, which is why he gave them plenty of time to continue to come to the table and give up enrichment, give up the nuclear program. But there was I won't say the particular moment, there was certainly a moment in time where he realized that it had to be a certain action taken in order to minimize the threat to us and our troops. Yeah.
General, you say that General Kurilla increased force protection in Iraq, Syria, and Gulf and those areas. Were they given any advance warning the attacks were coming? And also, Mr. Secretary, when were congressional leaders notified? How long before the attacks took place?
Sir, to your first question, you know, the risk has clearly been rising over the last few weeks in the region. Based on that and not a particular awareness of this operation, we've made smart decisions to minimize the risk to U.S. forces in the region.
So they were given no advance warning?
No, sir.
And congressional?
They were notified after the planes were safely out. Well, we complied with the notification requirements of the War Powers Act.
After the attacks, they were notified?
They were immediately thereafter. Yes.
Thank you, Secretary. Two quick questions. Do you believe you completely destroyed Iranian nuclear program? And how about Iranian ballistic missiles? Your ally as Israel always saying that is biggest threat. And second question is very important. What will be your next step if Iran or militias under Iranian influence in the region attack U.S. interests or allies in the region?
And you can chime in on this too, Mr. Chairman. The battle damage assessment is ongoing, but our initial assessment, as the chairman said, is that all of our precision munitions struck where we wanted them to strike and had the desired effect, which means especially in Fordo, which was the primary target here, we believe we achieved destruction of capabilities there. Ultimately, wherever it may be, whether it's in Iraq or Syria or bases in the Gulf, as the president said, it would be, as the chairman said, it would be a very bad idea for Iran or its proxies to attempt to attack American forces. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Regarding retaliations, Iran and North Korea are cooperating on nuclear and missile development. Do you think there is a possibility that Iran, North Korea, and the other forces, such as China, will join forces to retaliate against the United States?
Well, unfortunately, because of the policies under the previous administration, we drove those countries together, and ultimately that creates a challenging environment. For this particular operation, the focus is on Iran and Iranian nuclear capabilities. That's our focus here, is to not just say that they can't have, but President Trump has said from over 20 years, frankly, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And ultimately, he decided this is the moment, given their stonewalling, when direct military action had to be taken to prevent that from happening. Yes?
Thank you very much. General Kane, I understand OPSEC, I respect OPSEC. Can you say at all what security procedures are being taken to protect U.S. troops in Iraq and elsewhere in the Middle East? And Secretary Hegseth, as a global war on terrorism veteran, what do you say to veterans who may be concerned the U.S. is getting into another open-ended war in the Middle East over weapons of mass destruction?
Thanks, sir, for the question. I won't comment on what force protection measures are being taken in the region. What I will say is we're being proactive and not reactive, and being very thoughtful about ensuring that we do all that we can to protect our forces out there.
And I would just say, as the president has directed and made clear, this is most certainly not open-ended. It doesn't mean it limits our ability to respond. We will respond if necessary. The most powerful military in the world is postured and prepared to defend our people. But what the president gave us, as I said, was a focused, powerful, and clear mission on the destruction of Iranian nuclear capabilities. Those were the targets. That's what was struck. That's what was overwhelming. That's what was overwhelming. That's what the Iranian regime needs to understand, as the president put out last night. He wants peace. There needs to be a negotiated settlement here. We ultimately demonstrated that Iran cannot have a nuclear capability. That is a very clear mission set on this operation. Yes, hold on. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Question for the Secretary and the Chairman. How was this strike coordinated with the Israelis on a strategic level, militarily, and on a tactical level? Was there any direct Israeli military participation in this operation?
Well, I would say certainly Israel had an incredible military success, especially at the beginning and ongoing, in degrading Iranian capabilities, in degrading Iranian launchers, MRBMs. It's been incredible to watch what our ally Israel has been able to do. And there certainly have been conversations. I mean, General Kurilla at CENTCOM has worked closely in the defense of Israel for many years. And part of this operation was the defense of Israel and the ongoing defense of Israel. But as it pertains to this strike, this was U.S. operated and U.S. led.
We took advantage of some of the preparatory work that's been done over the past week and a half.
This is a major strike against their key strategic assets. And so I think we have to expect